You ever have one of those moments where something so unexpected happens, it feels like time just stalls? That's what it felt like for me that day. One second, I was lacing up my sneakers in the locker room after practice, and the next, he was standing in front of me, towel slung around his neck, dripping sweat, eyes locked on mine. Like he'd been waiting for that exact moment to do what he did. But I'm getting ahead of myself, let me rewind. So I'm Marcus. I'm a junior at a mid-sized college in Colorado, and until this story happened, I was basically invisible on the school's wrestling team. Not bad enough to be cut, not good enough to be anyone's favorite. I mostly kept to myself, stuck to my weight class, did my work, and left. Then there was him, Zach, our team captain. 6 feet 2 inches, all muscle, with this kind of effortless charisma that made everyone around him lean in just a little closer. He was the kind of guy who wore his confidence like cologne. Loud, but not in an annoying way, just magnetic. Zach wasn't just good, he was the best wrestler the school had seen in years. Undefeated in his weight class, always at the gym, always leading drills, always shirtless for some reason. We didn't talk much outside practice. He had his crew, other starters mostly, guys who walked around like they were already halfway to the Olympics. And then there was me, quiet, gay, trying really hard not to stare during water breaks. But sometimes, Zach would look at me, just for a second longer than he needed to. Not always. Just enough that I'd catch him in my peripheral and have to pretend I didn't. It started happening more after Coach put us in the same drilling rotation. "Marcus, you and Zach today." Coach barked, tossing us each a resistance band. Zach gave me a lazy smirk. "Don't hold back, all right?" That became our thing. He'd say that before every drill. "Don't hold back." And I never did. Even when he pinned me in 10 seconds flat. Even when his body was pressed over mine, in ways that made it very hard to think about anything, except how warm his skin felt against mine. I thought I was imagining things. The looks, the smiles, the fact that he sometimes lingered after practice until I was ready to leave. But then came the Thursday it all changed. Practice ended early. Coach had a meeting or something. The rest of the team peeled out fast. Some had plans, others just didn't like hanging around longer than they had to. I was the last one in the shower, or at least I thought I was. I had just turned off the water, reaching for my towel when I heard it, footsteps. I peeked around the divider and nearly dropped the towel. Zach, still in his gym shorts, shirtless, hair damp from sweat, not showered, not even pretending to be. He just leaned against the wall with this look, like he was sizing me up, but not in a competitive way. "Locker room's all yours," I said quickly, stepping past him. But he didn't move. "You always leave that fast?" I paused. "What?" Zach pushed off the wall and followed me down the row of lockers. "After practice, you're always the first one dressed, out the door, like you're avoiding something." "Just don't like hanging around," I said, keeping my back to him as I opened my locker. "You sure about that?" There was something in his voice that made my hands freeze on my shirt. I turned to find him standing too close. His gaze dropped to my chest, still damp, still bare, before meeting my eyes again. "Zach, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped in closer. "I don't know," he said quietly. I've been thinking about this." "This?" He didn't answer with words. He kissed me, just like that, in the locker room. After practice. No warning, no buildup. Just the kind of kiss that knocks the wind out of you, because it feels so impossible, it shouldn't even be real. His lips were warm, a little chapped, tasted faintly of Gatorade. My brain was still playing catch-up when he finally pulled back, breathing a little heavier than before, like he was the one surprised by what he'd just done. We stood there, a foot apart, his hand still resting lightly on my arm. It was the kind of silence that feels louder than shouting. "You okay?" he asked. I blinked, heart hammering. "Did you just kiss me?" Zach laughed under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah. I stared at him, searching his face for a sign. This was a joke. a prank. Some messed up team hazing I didn't get the memo on. But he just looked nervous. Like I held the power now. "You can hit me if you want," he added, voice soft. "I just had to know." "Know what?" He looked at me, dead on. "If you'd let me." That stopped me cold. I mean, yeah, I thought I'd caught him looking at me. I'd fantasized, more times than I'd ever admit, about something like this happening. But for him to actually say it, out loud, standing half naked in a locker room, it didn't feel real. "Zach," I began, but I didn't know where I was going with it. He held up a hand. "Look, I'm not trying to mess with your head. I'm not trying to play games. He let out a slow breath. "I don't know what I'm doing, all right?" That made two of us. He sat down on the bench, towel draped around his neck now, and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You ever feel like you've spent your whole life trying to be what everyone expects you to be?" I nodded, almost without thinking. "Yeah, that's what it's like being team captain. Coach expects me to be this alpha, always on, hard-ass leader. The guys expect me to be their buddy, their rock. Girls." He trailed off with a crooked smile. "Girls expect me to be the guy they see on Instagram." He looked up at me. "But you don't expect anything." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "Every time we drill, you look me in the eye. You fight hard. You don't act impressed or intimidated. You're just there." His smile turned faint. "It makes me forget I'm supposed to be someone else." Something about that hit me in the gut. Hard. I sank down onto the bench across from him, towel still clutched in my lap. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I don't know what I'm doing either," I admitted. His eyes met mine. "But you didn't hate it." "No," I said, breath catching. "I didn't." That little smirk of his returned. "Good." Then came the part that really messed with my head. He reached over, slow and cautious, and ran his fingers along the inside of my wrist. Just a light touch. Barely there, but it lit me up like a damn fuse. "You ever kissed a guy before?" he asked, still watching my hand. "No." "Want to do it again?" I didn't answer. I just leaned forward and kissed him. This time, it wasn't surprising. This time, I meant it. We stayed like that for I don't know how long. His mouth on mine, his hand on my thigh. My fingers tangled in the back of his hair, pulling him just close enough to feel his breath stutter. It wasn't just some drunken experiment or heat-of-the-moment thing. It was intentional, deliberate, and it scared the hell out of me. When we finally pulled apart, both of us flushed and breathing harder than we should have been, I asked the question that had been clawing at the back of my throat since the moment he walked in. "What does this mean?" Zach looked down at his hands, then back at me. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I know I don't want this to be the only time." We didn't talk much after that. Not that day, anyway. Zach threw on his clothes like nothing had happened, but his hands moved slower than usual. More careful. He glanced at me a few times while I got dressed, but neither of us said a word. Not until we hit the parking lot. He walked beside me in silence. The sky was turning soft shades of gold and lavender, that quiet lull before dinner time when the campus started to empty out. I could feel the questions rising in my throat, but I held them back. I didn't want to mess it up by asking too much too soon. He stopped near his car, an old black Tacoma with a dent in the passenger door, and leaned against the hood, arms folded across his chest. "So," he said, like it was the beginning of something. "You good?" I shrugged, standing a few feet away. "I think so. You?" His mouth twitched. "I don't know. I feel like I just blew up my own brain." I laughed, and that seemed to relax him. "I'm not trying to be dramatic," he added. "It's just, I've never done anything like that before. And I don't even know why I did it." I didn't respond right away, because part of me was scared he'd say he regretted it. that it was just curiosity, or boredom, or some spontaneous ego trip. But then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "I meant it, all of it." That kiss wasn't a fluke. That caught me off guard. "So what do you want to do about it?" Zach exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath since the locker room. "Nothing. Yet. I just needed to know what it felt like. Needed to stop pretending I haven't been thinking about it for weeks." That hit harder than I expected. He pushed off the truck, coming a little closer. "Look, I'm not going to ask you to keep this a secret. But I'm not ready to explain it to anyone else." "I get it," I said quickly. "I won't say anything." His eyes softened. "Thanks." Then he reached out and touched my elbow. Just a small gesture, but intimate in a way that made my chest tighten. "You going to the team dinner tomorrow night?" he asked. "Probably. Coach gets weird if I don't show." Zach grinned. "Sit with me." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a dare. It was just something. "All right," I said, keeping my voice even. He nodded like that settled it, then climbed into his truck and drove off. I stood there for a while after he left, staring at the spot where his hand had just touched my arm, wondering what the hell I'd just gotten myself into. The next day, things were back to normal, or at least everyone else thought so. Practice was brutal. Coach had us running extra drills for some reason, and I spent most of it trying to avoid making direct eye contact with Zach. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I did, I felt that same buzz in my chest. But he didn't ignore me. In fact, he was almost too normal. He still gave me the usual, "Don't hold back," before our spar, still tossed me a water bottle with that cocky grin, still smacked my shoulder like a bro. Except now, it all felt different. Like there was something under the surface, like he knew I knew, and that made every second of interaction feel electric. That night, at the team dinner, it became impossible to pretend nothing had changed. We all gathered at this pizza place near campus. Cheap, greasy, loud. The kind of place where no one noticed anything unless you were on fire. I walked in a little late. The guys were already settled in. Zach was at the back corner, wedged in a booth between two of the senior wrestlers. But the second he saw me, he jerked his head toward the open spot beside him. "Yo, Marcus!" "Here." Half the table turned to look. I felt that moment of hesitation, like maybe I should sit somewhere less obvious. But I didn't. I slid into the booth next to him, and Zach, casual as hell, put his arm along the back of the seat behind me, not touching me, but close. Very close. We didn't say much during the meal, just jokes with the rest of the guys, talking about the next tournament, complaining about Coach's cardio obsession. But every now and then, his knee brushed mine under the table, and neither of us moved. Later, when we were all heading out, he caught up to me outside. "Want to walk a bit?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, already matching his pace. We didn't go far. Just around the block, quiet streets lit by amber street lamps. The night was cool, crisp. "Perfect." "I've been thinking about that kiss," Zach said after a while. My heart skipped. "Yeah?" "I want to do it again," he said, stopping mid-step. I looked up at him, surprised by how serious he sounded. "Here?" I asked, half joking. Zach smirked, then stepped forward and tilted my face up. "Here," he said, and he kissed me again. Slower this time, more certain. Like he meant it. That kiss on the sidewalk lasted longer than it should have. Not because it was inappropriate or risky, though yeah, it was both, but because neither of us wanted to be the one to pull away first. It was soft, focused, nothing like the heat of the locker room kiss or the accidental closeness during drills. It felt like something that had been trying to happen for a long time, and now that it had, it wasn't ready to let go. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "That wasn't just a one-time thing," he said quietly. I nodded, heart thudding in my chest. "I know." Zach took a step back, rubbing his hands over his face like he was grounding himself. "This is new for me, okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I figured." He let out a small laugh. "You're handling this way better than I expected." I shrugged. "I've had a little more time to think about it." That got a smile out of him, one of the real ones, not the performative team captain grins he threw around at practice. We started walking again, slowly, just up and down the block like we didn't want the night to end. There wasn't much more to say right then. The air was heavy with everything unsaid, but not in a bad way. More like potential. When we finally reached his truck again, he paused, hand on the door. "I'm not out," he said, eyes fixed on the door handle. "I didn't think you were. And I don't know what this means, or where it's going." "Neither do I." He looked up at me. "But I want to figure it out." That was enough. "Okay," I said. "So we figure it out." The next few weeks were a strange mix of electric highs and muted secrecy. Zach and I didn't talk much at practice. Not more than usual, anyway. If anything, we were even more careful not to seem like anything had changed. But it had. And I felt it every time he gave me a slight glance during drills, every time our fingers brushed passing a towel, every time his knee tapped mine under the bleachers while coach lectured about balance and pressure points. The locker room was trickier. It became this tightrope walk, close enough to notice each other, never close enough to be obvious. But every so often, when no one else was looking, he'd tap the back of my knee with his foot, or drop a whispered joke in my ear, voice low enough to send a chill down my spine. Then one day, we were the last two in the showers again. It wasn't planned. I'd had a meeting after class and showed up late. By the time practice ended and I finished my last reps, everyone else was gone. Zach lingered by his locker, pretending to scroll his phone. I grabbed my towel and headed for the showers, heart already racing. I wasn't even under the water for a full minute before I heard it, the familiar clack of sandals on tile. "Mind some company?" Zach's voice echoed over the water. I swallowed hard. "No, go ahead." He stepped into the stall next to mine, quiet at first, just the hiss of water and the slap of soap on skin. Then, softly, "You look good today." I blinked. "What?" "During drills. You were fast. Sharp." "Thanks," I muttered, trying not to overthink the fact that he was naked and complimenting me through a thin slab of tile. "I watched you when you pinned Jansen. Your form's getting tighter." I grinned to myself, hiding it under the water. "You watched me?" He chuckled. "Don't get cocky." I shut off the water and reached for my towel. So did he, and suddenly, we were standing face to face, both dripping wet, steam curling around us like smoke. The room was quiet. Nobody else in the building. Just us. He stepped closer. "You ever think about this?" he asked, voice low. "Before, us. All the time." His jaw clenched slightly, like he was fighting a smile. Then he reached up and dragged his thumb slowly across my jawline. I think about it now, more than I should. I couldn't stop myself. I leaned in and kissed him. It was messy this time, urgent, slippery from the steam, full of heat and need. His hands gripped my hips and mine found the back of his neck. It was everything we couldn't do in public, everything we hadn't done since that night outside the pizza place. When we finally broke apart, breathless, he pressed his forehead to mine again. "We should probably not do this here," he muttered. "Probably not," I agreed. "But also, I really don't want to stop." We didn't go further that day. Zach pulled back first. Not with regret, but with restraint. The kind that says, "I want to, but not like this. Not rushed. Not here." He didn't say any of that out loud, but I could see it in his eyes. He stepped away, ran a hand through his wet hair, and muttered, "This is dangerous." I gave him a look. Dangerous? How? He glanced at me, lips twitching like he was about to say something smart but thought better of it. "We're in the middle of a locker room. Kissing." "Yeah," I said, drying off. Wasn't exactly subtle. "I don't regret it," he added quickly. "Not even a little." "Me either." We got dressed mostly in silence, tension still hanging thick between us, like leftover steam from the showers. But it wasn't awkward, just charged. Right before we walked out, he paused at the door and looked at me. "You busy this weekend?" I shook my head. "Why?" He smirked. "I was thinking we could hang out. Off campus, my place." My stomach did a somersault. "Like a date?" Zach pretended to consider it. "Let's call it an experiment." Wow, how romantic. He laughed, nudged my shoulder, and walked out into the hallway like he hadn't just casually invited me into the most private part of his life. Saturday night, I showed up at his apartment with a 6-pack of soda and a heart rate that could have powered a blender. It was my first time seeing where he lived. The place was cleaner than I expected. Minimalist, kind of sporty, like a guy who had just enough furniture to justify not living in a dorm, but not enough to seem like he cared about decorating. He opened the door in a t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot. Hair damp again, like he just showered. "Hey," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Hey," I echoed. We stood there for a beat too long before he cleared his throat. "You hungry? I got pizza." Always. He led me into the kitchen, where a pizza box was already open on the counter. I grabbed a slice and leaned against the island, trying to play it cool while my insides staged a nervous parade. "So," I started. "So," he repeated, mirroring my posture. We both laughed. "You're really bad at this," I said. "I am," he agreed. "You'd think being team captain would make me smoother. I think it just makes you louder." Zach rolled his eyes and nudged me with his elbow. "You're funnier when you're nervous." "I'm always nervous around you," I said, then immediately regretted how honest that sounded. But instead of brushing it off, Zach's expression softened. "I know." He didn't try to kiss me this time. Not right away. Instead, we sat on the couch with the TV on low volume and talked. About practice. About school. About how he ended up as captain when he never actually wanted to be. He told me about the pressure of always having to lead, always having to act like he knew what he was doing, even when he didn't. "I used to look at you and think, that guy's got it easy," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Me? Yeah. You didn't seem to care what anyone thought. You just did your own thing. Stayed quiet. Kept your head down." "That wasn't confidence," I said. "That was survival." Zach looked at me for a long time. Still looked like confidence from the outside. Then, finally, he kissed me again. No audience, no time limits, just the quiet hum of the TV and the soft sound of our breathing. This one was different. Slower, more certain. Like we were finally catching up to everything we'd been trying not to say out loud. We ended up lying on his couch, tangled up together, his head on my chest, my fingers in his hair. The pizza was cold by the time we remembered it existed. "I could get used to this," he said, voice muffled by my shirt. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'm not ready to tell everyone yet. But this I want to keep." The next few weeks passed like we were living in a bubble. Nothing official. No labels, no late-night Instagram soft launches or hand-holding on campus. Just stolen moments. Quiet walks back from practice, lingering hugs when no one was watching. That knowing glance across the gym when our eyes met during drills. We weren't a couple, not publicly. But in all the ways that mattered, we were. It wasn't always easy. Zach was careful, hyper-aware of every space we were in, who was nearby, who might see. I got it, I did. The team would eat him alive if they knew, not because they were cruel, but because locker rooms breed a kind of closeted intensity that makes honesty dangerous. Still, sometimes, It wore on me. One afternoon, after practice, we were the last two again, staying late to help coach organize gear. The rest of the guys had left. The place was mostly quiet, except for the occasional echo of footsteps from the hallway. Zach tossed a bag of headgear into a bin, then looked over at me. "You good?" he asked, sensing something. I shrugged, wiping sweat from my brow. "Yeah." But I wasn't. He knew it too. "You've been kinda quiet lately." "I'm always quiet." He narrowed his eyes. "No, this is different." I sat down on the bench, letting the gym bag slide off my shoulder. "I guess I'm just tired." He sat beside me, our knees almost touching. "Of what?" I hesitated. "Of pretending we're just teammates." Zach was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded, slowly. "Yeah, me too." "But you're not ready," I said, not accusing, just stating a fact. He let out a breath. "It's not just about being ready, it's about what I could lose. You know how this place is." "I do," I said, "but I also know how it feels to keep your life in compartments. And it sucks." He looked at me. Really looked at me, and I saw it there. The fear. The guilt. The part of him that wanted to open the door, but didn't know how to do it without breaking everything else in the process. "Let me ask you something," I said. "If you could be out, no consequences, no fallout, would you?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Then maybe that's enough for now." Zach leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're okay with waiting?" I thought about it. "I'm okay with you. So yeah, for now." He turned and kissed my shoulder. Not my lips. Not anything bold or reckless. Just a soft, grateful press of his mouth against my shirt, hidden in the quiet of the locker room. Things shifted after that conversation. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, meaningful ways. Zach didn't pull away as quickly when we brushed against each other at practice. He let his hand rest on my back for a second longer when we passed in the hallway. And on nights when his roommates were gone, he'd text me. "You up?" Doors unlocked. Those nights were different. Not just physical, but intimate in a way that was new for both of us. We'd lay in bed talking about everything, from dumb movies to what life might look like after college. Sometimes we didn't even kiss. We just existed in the same space, unafraid, unfiltered. It felt like the closest thing to peace I'd ever known. One night, we were lying on his floor, backs against the foot of his bed, playing old-school video games. He paused the screen and turned to me, the glow from the TV soft on his face. "I don't want this to be temporary." "Then don't make it." "I'm serious," he said, voice lower now. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want it to have you in it." That caught me off guard. I stared at him, trying not to let my heart explode in my chest. "You're gonna make me emotional in the middle of a Mario Kart race?" I said, laughing to deflect the way my throat tightened. Zach grinned. "I like you, Marcus. Like, more than I've ever liked anyone." "Good," I whispered, leaning in to kiss him, "because I like you too." We made it to the end of the season without getting caught. Barely. There were close calls. A too long glance during weigh-ins. Zach's hand brushing mine under the table at a post-meet dinner. One of the guys walking into the locker room just a second too early, catching us standing a little too close. But nothing stuck. No one said anything. Still, it started to feel like we were playing a game of inches. That pressure built in ways I didn't fully realize until it all cracked wide open. It was late March. We had just wrapped up our final home meet of the season. We won. Zach pinned his guy in under a minute, per usual, but there was something tight in his jaw afterward. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured he was just tired. Or maybe sore. We all hit the locker room like usual, loud with celebration, joking and yelling about where to go out after. Zach smiled and laughed along, but when our eyes met from across the room, something about his expression had changed. He was thinking. And it wasn't about the win. I showered quickly and got dressed, waiting outside for him like I always did when we left separately. But this time, he didn't come out. Not right away. After 10 minutes, I walked back in. He was sitting on the bench near his locker, alone. Hair still damp, shirt in his lap, untouched. "You good?" I asked. He looked up at me, eyes a little glassy. Not like he was crying, but like he was holding something back. "I'm tired," he said softly. "Yeah, it was a long meet." "No, I mean tired of hiding." I stepped closer, heart starting to thump harder in my chest. "Zach, I want to stop pretending," he said. "I want people to know. I want you to be someone I can hold hands with, without checking who's watching." My throat tightened. He stood up and walked toward me, slowly, like he was afraid I might flinch. But I didn't. Not when he reached for my hand, not when he laced his fingers with mine, and definitely not when he leaned in and kissed me. Right there, in the middle of the locker room, fully dressed, fully aware of what he was doing. The door opened. Someone walked in. It was Eli, one of the juniors. He stopped short, eyebrows jumping, and then he just kind of nodded, like it was something he already knew, or maybe something he didn't need to understand to respect. "Yo," he said, voice calm. "You guys coming to the bar or what?" Zach cleared his throat and stepped back, letting go of my hand slowly. "Yeah, we'll be out in a minute." Eli didn't say another word, just turned and left, the door swinging quietly behind him. I looked at Zach, stunned. "You okay?" He smiled, wide and real. For the first time in a long time, yeah. Word got around after that. Of course it did. Some guys were surprised, some weren't. A few avoided eye contact for a week, and that was fine. One guy cracked a joke during warm-ups the next day, and Zach shut it down so fast it never came up again. But for the most part, it was okay. Better than okay. We still kept things quiet in public, but not because we had to, because we wanted to. Our relationship wasn't a secret anymore. It was just ours. Private when we needed it to be. Visible when we chose. By the time graduation rolled around, we were both still figuring it out. But we were figuring it out together. And that was all I needed. Because no matter how it started, in a quiet locker room after practice, just the two of us, testing something neither of us could name, what we had became real. Stronger than whispers, louder than fear. Zach wasn't just my teammate anymore. He was mine.